Kayla and I'm new to YouTube. I'm currently a senior in college and I'm starting medical school in July, and I wanted to start this channel to hopefully help some people out with the whole application process, as well as give my perspective throughout the whole thing as someone who just went through it, and let you guys know what life is like in med school when I start this summer. I applied without taking a gap year and I took my MCAT in the middle of June, so I have some experience with the whole crammed cycle that a lot of you guys are now going to be facing with your MCAT being pushed back. So I just kind of wanted to start out with an overview of the whole process and when you should really aim to have everything done. So the primary application usually opens in May, and you want to submit that as soon as possible. I think I submitted mine around the last week of May or the beginning of June. It differs on whether you're applying MD or DO when you can apply, but it's usually still around the same time, like end of May or beginning of June. And then I took my MCAT on June 15th, and I got my scores back on July 14th. And by then, I had already had most of my secondaries pre-written, so when I got my MCAT scores back, I was able to turn in my secondaries and have most of my applications be complete within a few days from there. And then interviews start in August, usually late August, but majority of them will start in September or October, and interviews will run through March. So don't worry if you don't get an interview right off the bat, you have plenty of time. I received my first interview invite in July for an interview in August, and I applied to 12 schools. I was very fortunate and received interview invites to 7 of those schools, and I only attended 5 because 2 of them I declined just because I had other acceptances from schools I liked better, and I went on all of my interviews in August, September, and October, so I was done with the whole process. Around mid-October, I had those acceptances, and then from there I just sort of needed to figure out where I was going. Okay, so some tips for this process. First off, you're going to want to make a separate email just for your applications because you are going to get hundreds of emails throughout this whole thing, and it makes it easier when you're just searching for through your emails with your application stuff rather than every email that you have. And I also had an Excel spreadsheet that was so helpful. It had every school I was applying to, the date that I submitted my primary for the school, the day I submitted my secondary, the day that they marked my application complete, because you'll either get an email saying your application is complete or you're gonna have a portal that you can log into and that will have a complete date on there. And it's really important that you have these marked down because a lot of schools will give you a deadline like, oh, we'll have all of your materials and your application will be marked complete within 14 days of you submitting the last thing. And this allows you to make sure that everything is on track so you can call them up or email them if there seems to be an issue. I also had my username and my password for each school because a lot of them give you your own username, and you usually get to create your password, but it's still hard to remember all of your usernames and passwords, and this just makes it easier for you to navigate between schools anytime you want to check oh, do they have my letters of rec, or did they have my MCAT, or what's really going on. So for those of you who are in a situation where you're taking your MCAT over the summer, either by choice or because of it getting pushed back for Corona, I would highly recommend you start working on your primary application now. You can start working on your experiences and your personal statement so that when the application opens up, you can send it right away. This is really important because the earlier you submit it to even just one school, the earlier you can get your application verified. If you submit it within the first few days, it may only take a week for you to technically get your application verified. And what that means is after it's verified, you can send it to any school immediately. But if you apply later in the cycle, around July, it may take you up to a month to get your application verified, and then after that you still have to wait to get your secondaries and submit those, and you really want to apply as early as possible because this is a rolling process. And if you start your primary application now, that will allow you to just focus on your MCAT the few weeks before you take it. And then after you take your MCAT, take a few days to recharge, and then I would start researching the secondaries for the schools that you're going to be applying to. You can look on either Student Doctor Network, or you can just Google like what were the secondaries for the school in the previous years and start working on those then, so that way you're not trying to complete like 50 essays in a 2-week period. Because once you start submitting your primary applications, you're going to get a lot of secondaries pretty quickly once your primaries start going out to schools. What also really helps is having an Excel spreadsheet where you keep track of all of the questions that are asked and the different word counts or character counts, because a lot of schools are going to use the same essays. For example, a really popular one is to write about a challenge that you've overcome. And so what I would do is I'd have that at the top of my Excel spreadsheet. And say 3 schools asked me for that prompt with 500 words. I would write 500 words times 3. And then if one school asked for it with 2,000 characters, I would write 2,000 characters. And that would be at the top, so I would know, hey, this is a widely used essay, like I should probably get started on this. And then after that, I would sort of work on my secondaries in the order of how much I liked the school, so that way I could have most of those out quicker, so that way I was sort of ahead of the game for those schools. Another thing is really don't overlook any of the essays that you're going to be writing, because I do believe they play a really big role in your application. My personal statement, for example, was probably the thing that I've worked the hardest for like in my entire life, like with any sort of writing or assignment, and it came up in a lot of my interviews. So I feel like these writings can make a really big difference, because you're going against applicants that are going to have really similar GPAs, really similar MCATs, and honestly, you guys are probably going to have a lot of the same experiences. So when you have the chance to write about them on your primary application and your secondary questions, you really want to make sure that you're focusing on what you've learned from each one, and that you're just being as genuine as possible and really reflecting on these experiences, because that's what's going to make you stand out and make your application seem more sincere when everybody else is also scribing and volunteering in a hospital or going on a mission trip. These are really a chance for you to show who you are. And when you write your secondaries, I would always recommend to have someone else look over them, even if they have no experience with the whole medical school like application process. Like, I had my parents read a ton of mine just to make sure that everything made sense and to make sure that I didn't accidentally use the wrong school's name or something, because you're writing so many essays in such a short period of time, and it's really easy to overlook something like that just because you want it to be done. And most of the people who are going to be reading these essays are going to be glancing over them because they're going to have so many things to read. So it's really important that everything you write is clear and concise and just isn't confusing to read. I know a lot of us have the tendency to just want to make our writing sound as nice as possible, but this type of writing is really different because it focuses on what you've learned, and that's what makes a good essay. So sure, like, you want everything in your essay to be grammatically correct and to sound nice, but you want to make sure that it is very easy to read for somebody who just picks it up and looks at it for 30 seconds, because that honestly may be all you're getting from some of these readers. Lastly, it's really important to just stay calm and try not to compare yourself to everybody else, because places like Student Doctor Network or Reddit make it really easy for you to look online and see other people who have the same stats or lower stats and how they're getting interviews, and maybe you submitted your stuff first. And it can be a really frustrating process, but you just have to trust yourself and be confident that you're putting forth the best application that you can, because at the end of the day, who knows what certain admissions people are going to be looking for in each application, or if somebody else's gets looked at before yours because they're looking for certain criteria and applicants. Like, you really have no idea. And so you just have to really stay true to yourself and be as calm as you can, even though this can be a really frustrating process. And I wish you all the best of luck. And if you guys have any suggestions or comments on things that you would like to see, I'd really appreciate it if you guys could subscribe and like and let me know, because I'd really just like to help some people out and kind of give my insight on the whole process, since I did just go through everything and I'm about to be starting medical school and can give my experiences on what it's like going through everything for the first time. So thanks for watching. Hey everyone, my name is Kayla and I am testing out my lighting.